Welcome into the Your Illini Nation pregame show here to get you set for the season opening game, Illinois versus Wyoming, getting started here in just about 90 minutes. I'm Andy Olson. We'll soon be joined by Bret Beherns and Jeremy Werner live from Memorial Stadium. They're field side right now, getting you set for the game. I'm back here in the studio on the ones and twos here, making sure that you see everything from Memorial Stadium for this pregame show. Let's take a look at the matchup. It's the Cowboys and the Fighting Illini. Illinois looking to make some progress after their 5-7 season a year ago. This one is at 3 p.m. like I mentioned, about 90 minutes from right now on Big Ten Network. Should be a fun one. We're looking forward to it. We'll get you everything that you need to know coming up. Let's just go right to field side as we're speaking to them. Bret Beherns and Jeremy Werner getting us set to go, and let's bring them up here. There we go, Bret and Jeremy. Guys, it's looking good. It's looking hot out there, but it's an exciting time. The earliest Illinois football game in history.
And the hotness is here, although it is not as hot as last season with Nebraska, Jeremy. It was hot then.
I think we're just used to it at this point. I mean, you play in August, you're running the risk of potentially 90 degrees. When you get on this field turf, this new turf, with all this the tire pellets kind of coming up from the ground, the heat radiates. And I remember Brian Urlacher was here 20 years ago. He always complained about how hot it got on the surface here. But Bret Bielema said it's one thing the team hasn't been used to, because training camp's been pretty cool relatively. So we'll see how both sides handle the heat today.
Yeah, it is warm in here if you're coming out to the game. If you're at the tailgate right now, still at home, ready to come out to Memorial Stadium, it is hot. The sun is out. Not many clouds in the sky. Expect it to be a beautiful day for football here on this new turf, and it does feel warmer. I don't know, maybe it's just in our heads. It probably is. You'll know I got all the pellets in my shoes later because I'm on the field during the game, so that's my indication that the turf is new. Very spongy. It's a good-looking field today for this season opener, and Illinois comes in with raised expectations. I think overall, that's my first thought, Jeremy, is the bar has been raised by Bret Bielema in year two.
Yeah, I think year one, the biggest thing they showed is they're going to be competitive week in and week out most weeks, right? Every team might have a blowout or they might blow out another team. But what they showed last week is they can be in every game. But Bret Bielema said also throughout the offseason over and over again, I didn't come here to win 5 games. They were not satisfied with 5 wins. I think Bret Bielema showed the urgency by going out and hiring a new offensive coordinator, because the offense is what kept Illinois from really having a kind of great first season, relatively speaking, for Illinois. They were 2 plays away, tight to go Tim Beckman on you, but they were 2 plays away, 2 first downs away from beating Maryland, beating Purdue, if they did that on offense. And the offense was the issue all year. The defense took a huge step forward under Ryan Walters. But the expectations, I think, have been risen by how Bret Bielema has talked about this group, how he's talked about the team. He is not trying to set low bars saying, we got a rebuilding year. We'll see how we deal with a lot of these 50 or 60-year guys who moved on. No, he thinks this is a better football team in all areas, which is odd with special teams. We can bring that up later. But they have to be better offensively, and I think it's trying to maintain the standard defensively of what they set last year.
I love how Bielema has said that. I didn't come here to win 5 games. Illinois fans, 5 games is, hey, okay in that sense. If Illinois could just make a bowl game every year, I think Illini Nation would feel very, very good about that. But he wants more. He's known more his whole career, other than a few down years at Arkansas. He's been to a bowl game almost every year in his career, and he's looking to do that. If they can get off to a good step today, Andy, and beat a Wyoming team that I think they're more talented than, bar none, they're more experienced. Illinois plays a lot of newcomers. We'll get into that. But if they can take that first step forward like they did last year, beating Nebraska in that Week 0 season opener, they're going to at least have the confidence to know that, hey, they are heading in the right direction. Andy?
Yeah, guys, I 100% agree. And it's really funny when you look at the roster, the depth chart for Wyoming coming into this one. Everyone talks about how good they were a season ago, and Coach Bull has a great program up there in Laramie, but they're losing so many guys to that transfer portal. Guys going to the SEC, the Big 12, Wyoming. That just proves that they were a good program last year when they have guys going that way. We take a look one more time at the board. Again, this one 3 p.m. and I'm checking chat, by the way, so if anyone has any questions, we'll get to that a little bit later in our pregame show here, so be sure to send them in. I'll be sure to ask the guys what they think about your questions as well. So to me, you guys brought up the offense. The defense is going to be one of the key contributors, of course, this year. Top half of the Big Ten defense just a season ago. And Jeremy, I'll ask you this. What do you make about all those guys coming back in that front eight? You got guys like Keith Randolph and Johnny Newton, who played big minutes last year, now set to take an even bigger role in the defense this season.
Yeah, I think Illinois, you did lose a lot of starters on defense and a lot of guys who played a lot of games. Owen Carney and Isaiah Gay had their best seasons last year at that new outside linebacker position. I think Roderick Perry is someone that Illinois fans probably didn't hear a lot about, but he was so key in the middle at nose tackle for Illinois, and he was a big loss that they have to replace. And of course, Jake Hansen, I know he didn't play a lot last year, but he's been such a good producer and such a playmaker for them. Kalen Tolson surprisingly entered the draft, and of course Kirby Joseph on the back end of that defense. So that's a lot of guys to replace. But Bret, the one thing is they are very experienced in that maybe these guys aren't starters, but Seth Coleman is in his 4th year. Ezekiel Holmes at outside linebacker is in his 5th year. CJ Hart has been here, played well last year. Tariq Barnes in the middle of that defense, and Calvin Avery, who they think is finally ready for a breakout after shedding 30 pounds. We'll see how he can do it. I'm really interested to watch him in the trenches because it's so important at the nose guard position. But they have an average of 4.7 years of experience in their projected starters on defense. So even though they have starters to replace, they are an older defense going up today against a Wyoming team that's very young.
Calvin Avery might lose half of that 30 today and sweat on the field. But here's the thing for me, Jeremy. I think Illini Nation and from us, we should have earned that trust of Ryan Walters, that he completely changed things after the Virginia game last year, put his playmakers in positions to succeed, and then they did that. And like you mentioned, these guys have been around. They know what to expect. And Ryan Walters has my trust in that sense, that he's competent, he knows what he's doing, he has the respect of his peers, and that he's not afraid to sit people down if they're not playing. He did it last year with Tony Adams, and those guys are in camps now in the NFL. And so that is the biggest difference for me offensively, or compared to the offense. There's more unknowns offensively, I think. There is unknowns defensively because these guys haven't taken that full season step. But this time last year, we weren't talking about Kirby Joseph either, and he's a 3rd-round draft pick.
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad that Andy led with the defense because the offense is the story of the season, but for the offense and the whole team to take a step forward, the defense has to maintain a standard. Now, they could regress a little bit and still be a great defense because during Big Ten play, there are only 3 teams better than them at stopping teams from scoring points. So they were at an elite level. They should have made a bowl game. They should have won 8 or 9 games based on how the defense played late in the season. But they have to maintain that standard. But I agree with you. Ryan Walters, and I'll say this, the whole defensive staff, I think it's a defensive staff that a program like Michigan, a program like Iowa would be really happy to have. Kevin Kane is a former defensive coordinator at SMU, right? Andy Boo has been a defensive coordinator at 4 different FBS programs. This whole defensive staff is great, and Ryan Walters just seems to get the most out of his players. They trust him, his staff trusts him, and most importantly, puts them in best positions to succeed and make plays.
And I don't think it's lip service. All of those guys speak very highly of each other, and it could be a huge ego competition. And so much of the time in sports it is of those guys. They've all been DCs with the guys you mentioned, Boo and Kane and Walters at Missouri coming in, but he's the youngest of those guys. And yet he commands the respect. And I think that's something that stands out to me about who Ryan Walters is and what he's able to do in that room, because he's the highest paid assistant on this team, making $1 million this year.
Program history.
Exactly. And so, yes, he deserves that. I think he earned that last year. But that also comes with a lot of ego. It comes with a lot of potentially those things. And yet when you talk to Kevin Kane, when you talk to Andy Boo, when you talk to the other guys, on the staff, they just rave about what Ryan Walters does, because I think he gets it enough to know that he's maybe not the smartest guy in the room, and yet he can manipulate and do the things that he needs to do to get the best, even out of his assistants.
Yeah, and then the players rave about the staff as well. And, they've learned, a lot of these guys, they came here to play for a defensive mastermind in Lovie Smith. Now, it didn't work out here at Illinois, except for 1 year, but he's a head coach in the NFL, right? So the fact that they rave about his intelligence, his X's and O's, it just gives you confidence that they can find another Owen Carney, that Seth Coleman, who is a much higher rated recruit than someone like Owen Carney, had a bunch of big offers as well, that maybe he can be the breakout guy this year. Maybe they're the the ones to get the most out of Calvin Avery. Maybe they can find someone else in the secondary, whether it's Quan Martin taking another leap forward, or maybe Kendall Smith in his 6th season takes a big step forward. But there's just got to be a confidence based on the turnaround of being the worst defense during the pandemic season to one of the best. How can you not be confident in them?
Yeah. All right. Hey, we've made it like 8 or 9 minutes here, Andy. We haven't even talked about the offense yet. I think that's pretty good.
I'd say so, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I guess we'll get into the offense. I guess you can say that's the big story of the Illini right now. Of course, just a few days ago, Tommy DeVito, this transfer from Syracuse, being named QB1. I think if you asked around the Illini media circles, we kind of had an idea that it could be Tommy over Art Sitkowski, who came from Rutgers last season, played some meaningful time and got some starts for the Illini. But Bret Bielema keeps talking about wanting to bring in some competition into that quarterback room. And I don't want to harp too much on the quarterback situation. There's a lot of other parts of this offense that we can talk about, including the receiver room, how deep that running back room is with the two-headed monster of Josh McCray and Chase Brown once again being in the backfield. And of course, the offensive line situation. To me, that's one of the most interesting things, is that there's not as much experience on that offensive line as there was just a few seasons ago, or even going into last year. Now you do have Alex Palczewski, who has the chance to set the NCAA record, all of NCAA record for college football for starts. He needs 13 to tie that record because he's coming back for his 6th season. But you have some unknown commodities in JUCO transfers, Isaiah Adams and Zy Chrysler, who bring up some question marks, and Chrysler had to go and win that right guard spot. So I think through all that, we do have to start with the quarterback spot, Bret. And you guys have touched a little bit on the offense and the new offensive coordinator, Barry Lunney Jr., who's bringing in an entire different philosophy. But Tommy DeVito's the guy, the transfer from Syracuse, and Bret Bielema's hoping that he's going to help take that Illini offense a step up going into 2022.
Yeah, I think the defense obviously is important, and I'm fine that we led with that, because I think it is going to be the difference once again. I trust the defense more, but I think all of our headlines after today are going to be, this is what Barry Lunney Jr.'s offense did. It either did what it's supposed to, or we're going to have questions about why it didn't do what it was supposed to. I don't, like, we could like almost write our story right now, right? Like before the game, it's either, hey, they did it or they didn't. And that's where I go into this, wondering and questioning, because we haven't seen it in practice. They didn't allow us in to practice at all, really, once again. I don't know how much they're going to show today. That's another question I have for you. But, like, I want to see what it looks like. Is it different? How is it different? And what things is Barry Lunney going to do to get the playmakers the ball?
Listen, it is different. They're going to have a quarterback out of shotgun. They're going to have tempo. That doesn't mean, though, that they're going to run at a fast break pace the entire game, but they're going to see them run up to the line of scrimmage, look at the sideline, get the play call. Sometimes it'll be quick. Other times they'll take their time. They just want to keep the defense on their toes and on their heels, more so than the past offense was, which was more traditional, pro style. But he likes to call it tempo, right? You're running a pro style offense with some tempo. So there's still some of the key values that Tony Peterson had. You're going to see a lot of tight ends on the field, Luke Ford and Tip Ryman and Michael Marquez. They're going to hand the ball off a lot to Chase Brown and Josh McCray. And I agree with you, Bret. I think they'd love to not have to unveil too much of the playbook today so they can save some of it for Indiana. But this is a respectable Wyoming program, right? So you don't know if that's going to happen. But I think the biggest change has to be the passing offense. You and I have covered Illinois football for more than a decade here. It's been pretty atrocious since Nathan Shieldhouse left the program. Wes Lunt had a decent year. Riley O'Toole had some decent games. But other than that, Illinois has struggled at the quarterback position and just finding a way to get the ball in space and get the ball downfield to kind of get defenses to lay off Chase Brown, which is why it's amazing Chase Brown and Josh McCray had the years they had. It's a hat tip to the offensive line for the run blocking last year. But that's Barry Lunney's job. Get his playmakers the ball in space. Isaiah Williams will be a big part of that. We'll see who else steps up at wide receiver. But I think you're going to see more screen passes. I think you're going to see more shovel passes. And I think you're just going to see a lot more aggression with Barry Lunney Jr.
Yeah, in my eyes, can they get the quick hitters in downfield 5 yards at a time, 7 yards? That's positive. That's moving the sticks. If you can do that on first and second down and put yourself in a better spot in third down, it's not rocket science here. You're going to be more successful. And I trust Barry Lunney Jr.
I saw it on this field.
Well, yes, of course, last year. I mean, the last time Barry Lunney Jr. was on this field in a game, he beat Bret Bielema pretty crazy and small world how
And
he
Ryan
comes
Walters.
back here. And Walters, that was before they made the switch at Virginia. But like, I have a strong feeling of Barry Lunny Jr. He's got a great personality with us in the media, and I think he commands the offensive room as equally well as Ryan Walters commands the defensive room.
Yeah,
even though he's never been. This is his first time as an OC in Power 5.
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of hope when a new OC comes in, but I think there is a little bit different from the outside. When you heard Tony Peterson was hired, you're like, oh, that was interesting. He wasn't on my list, right? Because he'd kind of been an OC for a long time, kind of been at the Group of 5 level for a long time since he left Minnesota. Barry Lunny was the natural guy for this job. He was on my first list for Bret Bielema. And then you're just excited about what he did at UTSA, taking that program, which is a really new program, from one of the worst offenses to one of the best offenses, right? And you can see how this could be a transition that's different, but it also, these guys are, the offensive line's still blocking basically the same. The skill players are doing a little things differently, but it's a lot of the same values Bret Bielema has, which is running the football and then just being efficient in the passing game. They have to be more efficient in the passing game.
Yeah, and we know they're going to run the ball. Barry Lunny Jr. has said that they're going to be a run-first team, but the pass also has to complement that as well, and it largely didn't last year, and that was the concern. And we can discuss the concern of receivers behind Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington, who I think are the two top-tier guys there on this team. There are concerns, after that. I think we're going to see the tight ends more. You said we've been covering this team a decade, Jeremy. How many years have we said, they're going to get the tight ends more involved? It's every single year, and it doesn't happen. Look,
Well, I think the tight ends are going to be involved.
It's got to happen, right?
Especially as run blockers. I think that kind of gets overlooked. I think Luke Ford and Tip Ryman both really asserted themselves as blockers last year, which kind of gets overrated. I even think a guy like Pat Bryant, who you're going to see a lot more at wide receiver, really good blocker at wide receiver. But can I flip back? There's a new quarterback in Tommy DeVito, and his career has kind of been like the guy who just left Illinois, Brandon Peters. Had a really good year as a starter, then injuries happened, got replaced, fell on the depth chart at Syracuse. But there's a difference in Tommy DeVito. One, he's smaller, right, than Brandon Peters was.
No doubt.
But he's a more dynamic playmaker in that he's going to be able to run the ball. He can move the ball with his legs. I don't think you're going to see a ton of that, but he also brings a swagger. And there's one thing I think we heard over and over again from the past coaching staff was we need Brandon Peters to be the vocal leader. We need him to lift his teammates. And there were times when the offense couldn't get going, and it felt like Brandon just couldn't lift them out of it. I think Tommy has that New Jersey personality, that unbridled confidence, which is borderline cocky, but you kind of need that in your quarterback to believe in himself. So if he stays healthy, I'm really interested to see what he brings, because he has shown it at the Power 5 level. It's been a few years, but this offense seems like a pretty good fit for him.
Yeah, and I feel okay saying that it's an upgrade from Brandon Peters, and I don't think it's a gigantic upgrade, but I do feel strongly about that in what you mentioned, and it's the intangibles a lot for me. I think Brandon could talk a little smack. I think he had that in him. We saw that even on the field at certain points, but I don't know how much he commanded it. The thing that I've taken away from talking with this team in training camp, Tommy commanded that from the start.
Yep.
He came in, he knew he was the grad transfer. This is his last chance to play football in college. And I feel like, at least from what they have told us from the players and even the coaches, that Tommy's understood that he knows that he's got one chance here, and that he came in, similar, like on fire, right? I mean, he just knows this is it, and this is his team.
You know what it reminded me of a little bit? I know this year wasn't thought of really well, but I thought A.J. Bush brought a lot of the same things in
Agreed.
2018, and that was a really good offense. I think we forget, he wasn't a great passer, but he was a heck of a runner, and he had that swagger. Like, he had that team, and it kind of reminded me of that quarterback competition that year. We all knew A.J. Bush was going to be the starter. We all knew Tommy DeVito was going to be the starter. So I'm glad Bret Bielema came out and said it. Got his team in the news cycle on a Friday going into the game, and also probably got fans a little bit more excited knowing it's going to be something different, because I think Artur Sikowski has proven himself that he can come into a game like last year against Nebraska and give you a chance. But I think I know he was injured, but I think we've seen over his career, is he a dynamic playmaker? We haven't quite seen that. I think he'd need better wide receivers to be that. I think Tommy DeVito can be that playmaker. Man, his Syracuse offensive line was terrible, and he still found a way to make plays.
Yeah, and I think when you go back to the offensive line and where this really started, Andy, with your conversation here, I feel okay about the offensive line. There's experience there in a sense. It's not like 2017 when they're rolling out Alex Balcheski as a freshman, but how do they gel together? And I think that's my biggest thing today in the offensive line. Can you get Isaiah Adams and Zy Chrysler on the same page as an Alex Pihlstrom at center, who gets his big opportunity here to take over for Doug Kramer? And can they gel with Palczewski? And can he lead them? And I do feel confident in that. Palcho will do his best to lead these guys and play well. And then Julian Pearl on the other side, look, that dude's got as high of NFL prospect in my eyes as anybody because he's so dang long.
Yeah, I think in December, offensive line was my biggest concern. I think coming into today, it's way lower on my list of concerns.
Okay.
Because one, we didn't know Alex Palczewski was going to come back. Two, you didn't know that Isaiah Adams was going to be on board or that Zy Chrysler existed. We didn't know that at that time. So the fact that those guys have come in and won those jobs, this is a very different offensive line. I mean, Doug Kramer and Vederian Lowe are in the NFL for a reason. Jack Badovanak got invited to a rookie camp, right? Like, he had a really good end to the year last year. That's a lot of experience loss. But I think this offensive line, they think is more talented. Now, I think it's going to have some growing pains because Chrysler hasn't played at this level. Adams hasn't played at this level. But those guys are huge. Chrysler's 6'6", 340 pounds. Adams is 6'6", 310 pounds. Pearl, as you said, looks like an NFL left tackle. Alex Palczewski is a monster. And then Alex Pihlstrom, who started 7 games so far at Illinois, they felt confident enough in him at center that they didn't go get a grad transfer at that position. He's 6'5", 300+ pounds as well. So I agree with you. I think they feel pretty good about the offensive line, but they're the key today. They are absolutely the key today to show that this is going to be the identity of Bret Bielema teams, that Illinois fans, you don't got to worry about offensive line with this program because they're just going to replenish like Wisconsin, like Iowa. They're going to be fine up front. And that's what's going to win today. If they can own the trenches and just run the football all over a young Wyoming defense, I think Illinois will have a great day.
Yeah, and we should mention the heat as well. I met a couple of the Wyoming beat reporters on the way up to the press box earlier, and they were like, man, it is hot here. And I'm like, well, it wasn't as hot as last year. But they said when they left Laramie earlier this week, it was in the upper 50s. Yeah. So Wyoming players have not been accustomed to this. We'll see how much, especially on the trenches, they can handle it. I feel a little bit better, although it has been pretty cool August overall, that Illinois guys will be more used to that. Any other position battles you're looking for today that we haven't seen? Both guard spots are now accounted for, quarterback obviously. Is there anything else standing out that catches your eye that we'll want to keep our eye on?
I just want to mention with the offensive line, Jordan Slaughter didn't win that job, but he's a guy they thought might have started games last year if he were healthy. So the fact that you might have that depth piece there, I think is really good for Illinois. I think wide receiver, right? I mean, we kind of mentioned it, but Isaiah Williams is the guy. You got to get him 8 to 10 touches a game. I think he could be in for a great year. He reminds me so much of Wan'Dale Robinson, who had a breakout year last year for Kentucky, but Illinois fans remember him putting up yards against Illinois at Nebraska. But Pat Bryant is a sophomore that played a lot last year, showed some flashes, was a really good blocker. Casey Washington, I think, is a solid player in the Big Ten. But the one big emergence we heard about during training camp was Brian Hightower. We were talking about Deshaun Miller, the freshman, need to play. Well, Brian Hightower, who 2 years ago was their second best receiver outside of Joshua Maturbebe, led the team in touchdowns with 3. He didn't play at all last year. There was an injury. He wanted to redshirt because he never felt right the entire season. It was a weird situation as we were going through it. But I kept saying, like, man, he's talented, a former 4-star prospect transfer from Miami. I think he's really important. And then in the secondary, the second cornerback spot, it sounds like it's going to be Taz Nicholson, who played last year. Didn't play all that well, but got his feet wet. Tony Adams is a big loss. Can Taz Nicholson step up, or is Terrell Jennings the transfer there? And one guy we heard led the team in interceptions during training camp is freshman Tyson Rooks, who's 6'4", 190 pounds, a really impressive long-term ceiling for him. Is he ready to play right away? Probably not. So you want to see Taz Nicholson really step up in that spot.
Yeah, and Bret Bielema had very high praise for the freshman and Matthew Bailey and what he was able to do, and a late ad, by the way, so we'll see how that plays out. Any other freshmen you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, Gabe Akis.
Okay. That dude's a man.
You won't think he's a freshman. I remember he came here for his official visit last October, and Joey Wagner looked at me and says, "Is that a transfer?" So nope, that's Gabe Akis, 6'3", 265 pounds. Sounds like he's in the 2-deep at outside linebackers. So I could see him rotating in with the starters, Seth Coleman, Ezekiel Holmes, Alec Bryant, former 4-star transfer. But Gabe Akis will probably get some playing time there. I think eventually Henry Boyer at tight end will play. Eventually Aiden Lawfrey, he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, could play. And maybe some wide receivers. Sean Miller, Ashton Hollins is certainly a position they need some more talent.
Andy, anything else you're keeping an eye on position-wise today?
I think you guys pretty much hit all the ones that I'm looking at. I think tight end will be interesting too. You mentioned Luke Ford and Tip Ryman both getting time blocking there last year, but how are they going to get involved as well? Seeing if Bailey gets some time in that secondary will be really interesting. And that nose tackle spot, Rod Perry moving on. Is it going to be Calvin Avery to take that spot? Is it going to be T-Raw Edwards, the transfer from Northwestern, slotting in there? All things that we will find out here in about 60 minutes as we're getting closer to the end here of the Your Illini Nation pregame show. I do want to mention, since this is the season opener, we should probably look at the schedule a little bit ahead. Again, a week 0 game for the Illini this year, which means they get an extra bye week during this season. It's not a Big Ten game, though, so they get the non-conference game in week 0, but it is an important game that they do need to win against a tough Wyoming squad that we've been saying all day that could propel them to getting back to a bowl game. And coming off that 5-win season, you guys already talked about it. Bret Bielema not used to just 5-win seasons. So give me your guys' thoughts. We'll start with Jeremy here, just about that chance of getting to 6 wins before we get into our actual predictions for this game coming up right here.
Yeah, I think the schedule sets up, Andy, where it's really important to take advantage of the early part of the schedule. You've got to beat Wyoming. You've got to beat Chattanooga. These are games now that Illinois shouldn't have to worry about winning. Like, we've got to get past the Eastern Michigan. Even the UTSAs, like, there's good group of 5 programs. USF just owned you, right, for 2 games. Like, you've got to find a way to take care of those games, those bye games at home. Traveling to Indiana, the road is never easy. Indiana's had some success, but it's coming off a terrible season last year. You got to win that game, or you got to split that one in Virginia. Virginia loses a lot of talent, but man, that schedule gets really tough in October when you have Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, back to back to back. A lot of people think the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, Nebraska, Northwestern, those are the programs you beat last year. You'd love to beat again this year to have a chance to get to the bowl game. Of course, Michigan and Michigan State are really tough crossovers, but there's a lot of toss-ups in there. I think Michigan and Wisconsin, to me, are elite teams in the Big Ten. As long as you're not talking about Ohio State, those are the next teams. We know Iowa and Michigan State are very good as well, so all those are going to be very difficult. But Bret, those toss-up games, they got to win more of them than they have in the past.
Yeah, and you got to win these games at home like this, like you mentioned. For me, it comes down to next week. If they're going to go over 4.5, they have to win at Indiana. I think that's really, really important. I think they're still at a point where they're going to lose a game they probably shouldn't. Yeah. And after last year and going on the road and beating Penn State and Minnesota, 2 ranked teams, they're probably going to win a game that they shouldn't. So I think that's where they're at overall, and we'll see where that plays out the whole season. I think the bowl game, and I had a lot of people ask me, I don't know what you finalized the number at. I've told people I feel strongly that they can get to 6. I really do, but I'm probably more at 5 and 7 at this point.
Yeah, I've been debating 5 and 7, 6 and 6. I decided to go 6 and 6 because, to be honest with you, I trust this coaching staff.
Yeah.
I think it's a really strong coaching staff. I don't know if the defense will be as good as last year, but I expect it to be very good relatively. I think it's going to be top 50 in the country. If the offense can go from 115th to 85th, where Minnesota, Wisconsin, some of those programs are, I think that's a bowl team. We haven't mentioned special teams. That's going to be important as well, not to fall down too much after losing James McCourt and Blake Hayes and Ethan Tabell. You need Caleb Griffin and Hugh Robertson to be solid for you and not lose some of these close games. So that's an X factor. But yeah, I think 5 and 7, 6 and 6 is about where people think. I think it could be a 7-win team. I mean, it should have been a 7-win team last year.
No doubt.
The most optimistic I would go would probably be 8. But if injuries happen, I'm really concerned, as always with Illinois, is depth. Depth is always the concern. If they have key injuries, do they have the players to replace them? That's still my big question. So if the right injuries or the wrong injuries happen, maybe this could be a 3 or 4 win team. But I think 5, 6, 7, that's probably where I would expect.
Yeah, and I think, like, you hit the nail on the head with the coaching staff. I think they should have earned that trust for Illini Nation at this point, that they're more competent than what Lovey's staff was. I know Lovey's an NFL head coach, been very successful, but overall, this staff understands the college game more, and I think they should have that trust from us.
It's going to be really important for recruiting. You know, Bret Bielema was talking about a higher standard. Now it's time to do it. I know it's only year 2. I'm not saying they're going to compete for the Big Ten West Championship, but it's time to make bowl games, which aren't that hard. We always talk about that. Bowl games are not that hard to make. It's time to make them.
Yeah, half the teams in the country, more than half, make a bowl game. We'll see if Illinois can get to that point. And you mentioned special teams. That's really critical for a Bret Bielema team. who wants to control the tempo. He's played close games his whole career, and he mentioned that as well. If they're going to be a controlling, ball control type of team, they need to have solid special teams. Real quick here, we've gone all this way. We haven't mentioned Wyoming, who is not named a starting quarterback. Any other guys for Wyoming that stand out to you, Jeremy, that you go, this is a number of players we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I would expect it to be Andrew Peasley, who's working out right behind us. Utah State transfer, played some games there. I think he's really dangerous with his legs. As a passer, maybe not as proven, but he really hurt people with his legs, and that's my concern here. Is Wyoming's been a good running football team. Bart Miller was the offensive line coach, so they have kind of a similar pedigree of what Bret Bielema wants to do. I think Illinois should have the advantage in the trenches. They need to. But I think if they can shut down the inside running game with a good player in Titus Swen, their running back is really good. I think he can play at the Power 5 level. But if you can stop that quarterback keeper, the rollouts, all of those things, force them to throw the ball and maybe make mistakes. Because we've talked about it. The line to start this was 10 points. I don't know if the bettors had caught up with everything Wyoming had lost. They have 3 starters returning on offense, 5 starters returning on defense, and a multitude of their starters, majority of their starters, are freshmen or sophomores. So it's a young team that's experienced a lot of turnover in the offseason.
More than a dozen freshmen and sophomores in that starting lineup. We'll see how that plays out. And they've used the reverse portal. Illinois can go grab players that played a group of 5 level or lower and bring them up, and they've done that. But they can go get guys in the reverse side because those guys want playing time. We'll see how that all plays out here. Andy, we'll send it back to you one final time here before we decide to make a prediction. I haven't completely decided yet which way I'm going here today.
I think I've got my prediction, but I will wait to give it until you guys give yours. Let's take one more last look at the board here. Wyoming and Illinois, 3 p.m. on Big Ten Network. August 27, the earliest game in the 100-plus year history of Illinois football, beating last year, 2021, when they played Nebraska on August 28th. That one on Big Ten Network. 60 minutes here until we get going. We've broken down each side for Illinois and Wyoming, each side of the ball for the Illini. Everything that we have to preview, I think we have. Now it is time to get to our predictions. Bret had mentioned 4.5 is the season win total for Illinois. This game started out as a 10-point difference. I believe I saw it get up to about 14, so a big swing in the Illini's way. But I'll send it to you guys of what you guys think will happen down on Memorial Stadium here in this one.
You want to go first or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
I think this is a game Illinois should control. I think it should be a healthy dose of Chase Brown and of Josh McCray. I think Illinois needs to run for 200-plus yards in this game, get Isaiah Williams sprinkled in there, get him going, but truly unveil the passing offense against Indiana. Ryan Walters and his defense, I think, should be able to control what is a very young Wyoming offense. So I think as long as you don't have too many costly penalties, as long as you don't turn the ball over, this game Illinois needs to control in the trenches. I have them winning 35-13.
Okay, you got more points than I do. I'm going to say 27-10. I think Illinois, like you said, will control the tempo, and I don't know if they get over that 30 mark. We don't know. We don't know what Barry Lundy is going to do.
We've seen too much Illinois offense.
I know, right?
Time, right?
Jeez, 9 overtime game that neither team gets over 30 or 20. It's just one of those things where I have questions, but I think they control the game. And I think even at 14, Andy, they cover that spread. What are you thinking?
I think I'm going to go with, I'm very close to Jeremy here. I'm going to go 38-10. I think that they win by 4 scores. I don't know why I got so much confidence. Maybe it's just because this is only my second season 38. Opener with the Illini. But personally, I buy into the tempo offense, and I think they get it done against a Cowboy team, guys, that, as we've already mentioned, is lacking a lot of that experience from last year.
All right.
Yeah, Bret, I just think if this were the Wyoming team that returned Isaiah Nair, if they returned Xavier Valladay, if they returned Levi Williams, their quarterback, I'd be more nervous. I think this would be a really, really close game. It's just Wyoming has lost so much talent and so much experience that I don't think they're the same program that has been good under Craig Bowl. I think they'll be fine in the Mountain West, but going up against a Power 5 opponent, I think they should have issues.
Yeah, it would be good for Illinois' sake if they could come out and get a big double-digit win, no sweat in the fourth quarter. We've covered these a lot longer, Andy. Maybe that's just like some bad football we've seen, juju in the past or whatever. No, I'm just teasing. We'll see if Illinois can start the second year of the Bret Bielema era on a good note. And my eyes will be on Barry Lunney Jr.'s offense today and how they come out and approach that. Andy, for Jeremy, I'm Bret. Send it back to you. Good first show, buddy.
All right. Thanks, guys, so much. We appreciate your coverage there from Fieldside at Memorial Stadium. And don't forget that you can get so much more from them as well later, Jeremy, on IlliniInquirer.com. We're going to have highlights and more coming from the press conference after the game. We won't have highlights at 5 unless the game gets, at 6 unless the game gets over with in time, but we'll keep you updated on that. 10 o'clock, be sure to tune in for highlights, post-game sound, and Brett Beherns' report from Memorial Stadium over there on the season opener. This game getting started in about 60 minutes. Be sure to tune back in for the post-game show. We'll be streaming Bret Bielema's live remarks after the game as well. Thanks so much for joining us before the game. It's been fun. We're going to do this for 11 more times. Hey, maybe 13, maybe 14 more times this season as well. Always keep a positive mindset. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you after the game. Be sure to join us again on air at 10 o'clock. Enjoy the game.